Hi, everyone. I am coming to you with my friend Gretchen Beedle, who is a financial advisor with the Connor Group, and she's going to be covering the topic of the Paycheck Protection Program and how it may financially assist you in your business as a real estate agent. And so, Gretchen, would you please tell us more about it?
That is my pleasure, Ashley. Thank you so much for the opportunity just to be able to share some of the information that we've dug into. Many of you have probably heard that Congress passed the CARES Act right at the end of March, and as part of that, created a $350 billion paycheck forgivable loan program. Now, this was designed for a wide swath of people, not the least of which got most of the attention, would be businesses that had employees that they paid under a W-2. But it also included people who are self-employed or are contractors and receive 1099 income. Now, the PPP, which is how I'm going to refer to the Paycheck Protection Program, did ask that all independent contractors and self-employed individuals wait until April 10th before they applied for the PPP. So I will tell you from my limited experience with some of the professionals and business owners that I've worked with that their CPAs and sometimes their bankers have not been particularly knowledgeable about this particular act and what it entails for people who don't directly pay W-2 employees. But I want you to know, as realtors, you are eligible to apply for the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. But the way it's going to be structured for you is be a little bit different if you don't already pay directly an employee or only pay an assistant maybe on a 1099 basis. So for you, the way that you would apply for the PPP is, first and foremost, you have to go to a bank. And while it would make sense that some of the larger banks that are out there, like a Wells Fargo or of a Bank of America or SunTrust, would be probably up and running and a little bit more capable of providing in this particular realm, what we found is that they don't have necessarily the liquidity to handle the tremendous demand that came along with regard to the PPP. So I heard anecdotally last week, after they had rolled out the first round for regular small businesses that paid employees through W-2s, that Chase Bank and Wells Fargo had completely cut off all new applications, that they had kind of met what their liquidity could support and they weren't going to take any new applications, which was kind of a bummer. Those are really big banks and would have been a great resource to a lot of folks. I know the Federal Reserve is working to kind of open up their liquidity, but it probably makes more sense to try to get in touch with a smaller bank. And if you already have a relationship with someone, that is the first place to start. Now, the PPP does structure this through something called the SBA 7A loan program. And all that means is you need to find a bank that's already set up for that. And around this area, Pinnacle, American National, Atlantic Union, Bank of Botetourt, Bank of Fincastle are all already in the 7A program. So those are all
Freedom First. Freedom First is our bank, and they were already set up for it, and they were wonderful.
Well, and surprisingly, one of my clients said that who were using Freedom First, that they weren't initially set up, but that's how quickly they got into the 7A program. So they have already been added to the 7A program and are ready to kind of jump forward. So that, again, I was going to mention exactly that. Freedom First is another area, which makes me feel like member one is also right there as well. So that would be where you would go to try to apply. But the bigger question is, how do you figure out how much you can apply for? And how do you kind of work out, well, this is a loan, but is it forgivable? How does that work? How does that happen? One of the first things people need to try to do, if at all possible, is that even though the tax deadline for 2019's tax returns has been pushed out to July 15th, today would have been the day you needed to file your tax return by, right? April 15th. It is in your best interest, if you haven't already done so, to file your 2019 tax return. The reason is you need to pull information off of one of the forms that as a realtor you probably file in order to figure out what your eligibility is. So I'm going to share my screen real quick to show this particular form. So if you can see this on the screen, this is Schedule C off of the 2019 tax return. So it's your profit and loss from business. I would imagine this is how most of you probably report both the income that you're generating out of your work as a realtor, and also where you record the various, so I'm going to scoot it over to my other screen, the various expenses that you have. So as you scroll down on this screen, it's where you kind of calculate up all of your different expenses, subtract it from your income, and at line 31, can you see that down in the bottom right here? Line 31, what that total is for 2019 will help you determine what you need or how much of the PPP you qualify for receiving, okay? So first and foremost, you need to file your 2019 tax returns, or at least get them prepared. And then you need to figure out what comes up on that line 31 on Schedule C. That is your 2019 kind of average total income. Divide that by 12 and then multiply it by 2.5 times, okay? So that 2.5 months essentially worth of your overall income is what you qualify for when applying for the PPP. Now here is where it gets a little unique and definitely to the benefit of self-employed individuals and contractors like realtors. Under the PPP, in order for the loan to then ultimately be forgiven, you have to have the same percentage of full-time equivalent employees based on a set time last year or a set time this in early 2020 before the COVID pandemic really kicked off, and compare it to your full-time equivalent employees during the average 8 weeks that the PPP essentially covers, right? That 2-month time frame. But if you're a self-employed individual, you're just paying yourself. So it's not as if you have to calculate a percentage of full-time equivalent employees to figure out what percent of the loan is ultimately going to be forgiven. As long as the 75% of that loan amount is designed to pay you, which you're paying yourself, then it is going to be forgiven. The remaining 25% is limited to a couple of expenses that are considered covered, and that is rent expense, utility expense, or mortgage interest, but not principal on a mortgage that's already in place before February 15th of 2020. So any of those other expenses that you've already been recording as of 2019 can also be included in that loan amount and would be considered forgiven as well. So ultimately, it's designed to cover you for 2 months worth of kind of payroll and rent, utilities, or mortgage interest over an 8-week time frame. Now, is that the time frame that this is going to last? Is it going to go on longer? I don't know, but they're already working on another stimulus package that could potentially provide more relief to small businesses going forward. We don't have any details on that yet, but at least you can get us through some level of uncertainty over the next 2 months, and then we'll kind of figure out what else comes along after that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And may I add, when speaking about the timing of it all, I applied for the PPP as an employer for W-2 staff on the Friday that we were allowed to, which was about a week and a half ago.
April 3rd, yeah.
Yes. And I received my loan application from Freedom First Credit Union 2 days ago. So it took about a week and a half to get the final loan documents. But I didn't think that was too terribly long to wait for everything that they're doing.
It definitely feels very cumbersome right now because we are just in, and I hate to keep using this word, but it's the truth, we're in unprecedented times. So like if you've tried to apply for unemployment benefits, which even as a self-employed individual you now qualify for, you immediately got declined because the system isn't set up to support people who were self-employed.
Right.
Under the CARES Act, you are allowed to now get unemployment benefits, but the VEC, the Virginia Employment Commission, is so inundated with 1,000% more applications than what they normally handle that they're swamped and they're overwhelmed. Same thing with the PPP and the CARES Act. These banks want to be supportive to their clients or to the community to try to help meet these needs, but they're overwhelmed as well. So it's not a surprise that it took a little bit of time. Now, Ashley, when you said you got your application, was that the actual application to apply, or
No.
were those the loan documents
That
that
was
you?
the loan documents. I signed the actual loan documents agreeing to my payment terms,
Mhm.
the maturity date, all of that. It was the actual, yeah, loan documents. So I was
And
thrilled.
yeah, and I will say I got a chance to look over some loan documents for another one of my clients who also is using Freedom First. And you probably saw this. Those loan documents did not include anything with regard to forgiveness.
They
So,
did not. No.
right, they don't. And that can be a little nerve wracking for any business owner. I'm going to take on this debt, and at the end of the time frame, they're telling me I have to pay back this substantial amount of money that I have to do over the course of 2 years.
Right.
I'm not in a position to make that commitment. Is this really worth it? Well, the fact of the matter is, most banks, especially the smaller banks around this area, are going to use kind of boilerplate loan document generation programs.
Mhm.
When I looked over the ones from Freedom First, they were the exact same boilerplate documents that I used when I worked as a commercial banker for 11 years with Stellar Run, Union First Market, Union, Atlantic Union, whatever name it is today.
Right.
So I want to reassure people that as long as the purpose of the loan is listed as the Paycheck Protection Program,
Mhm.
they are still eligible for the forgiveness component, even though it may not be directly stated in the loan documents, because their system just isn't designed to handle that component of it.
Right.
So just be aware of that. And as your folks are kind of moving through this, that's just one more kind of hiccup that we have because they haven't figured out how to deal with this yet.
And have never done it before.
Yeah, this is all new territory for everyone. And I know that in the banking industry, those folks are working, 18-hour days trying to get on top of this as quickly as possible.
Oh, my business banker was emailing me at 11 p.m. last night. So
Yeah. So be patient with them, but just know that you do have the ability to apply. The means for applying is completing your 2019 tax return and pulling that number off of line 31 of your Schedule C, dividing it by 12, and then multiplying it by 2.5 times to come up with your eligible loan amount. 75% of that can be spent essentially paying yourself, and up to another 25% can be used for those other covered expenses. That being said, if you're a self-employed individual, 100% of the loan can be used for paying yourself, and it's still 100% forgivable. It's just that little bit of wiggle room to cover a couple other of the covered expenses. And Ashley, I emailed you a couple of links that just give you a nice summary of the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program. And although it's focused more for businesses that have W-2 individuals, it still is a great resource for people to read through because there's just so much to digest from everything that's going on.
and I'll be happy to attach those when I send a link to this video. Yep.
Fantastic.
Thank you for providing those.
Yep. Now, one of the questions you did ask me about is, are real estate agents eligible to apply for the SBA provided Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or the EIDL program? So that particular program has been around for a long time. You do not have to work through a local bank to do that. You can apply right on the SBA's website. And there's a component of that that includes up to a $10,000 advance and forgivable loan, or another way to put that is a grant. That sounds very attractive, and I know a lot of people have flooded the SBA websites also trying to apply for the EIDL.
Yes.
They made a change just in the last few days that now states that $10,000 advance is limited to $1,000 per W-2 employee. So if you have W-2 employees, you can qualify for $1,000 per number of those employees, but you no longer, as a non-employer, right, doesn't mean you're not a business owner, but a non-employer, you're no longer eligible for that $10,000 that had once been considered potentially a grant for people who had been impacted by an economic disaster. And while we can all agree COVID pandemic is an economic disaster, they're trying to spread the money around as best as possible. And so they've made some changes to that particular program as well. So more than likely, that's not going to be a resource, even though it was tossed around as one in the early weeks of all of this. They've since shifted how they've got it set up, and it's not structured in the exact same way. Doesn't mean you can't apply, but the PPP and the EIDL cannot be used for the same purposes, right? You can't apply for them in two different places. So really and truly, your better bet is going to be through the Paycheck Protection Program.
Agreed. And I, being a business owner and having W-2 employees, I applied in both arenas, but I had
Mhm.
planned on using the PPP exclusively for payroll and then using the EIDL for other resources for utilities or rent or,
And
you know.
that's exactly how it's intended. But I think that they've really curbed back on the EIDL
Oh,
program because they put the PPP in place. Yeah.
yes. Yes.
So,
Well, it took my eligibility on the EIDL down from $10,000 grant possibility down to a $4,000 grant possibility because we have 4 staff members. So,
mhm,
yeah.
exactly. So just lots of changes and changes that are happening pretty quickly, which can make that really tough for people to figure out, like, what do I do? Who do I talk to? Where do I go in this?
Mhm.
What I will say is, and I'm speaking totally anecdotally, and this is coming from right as the CARES Act passed to as the PPP was initially rolled out on April 3rd to the last week when people were trying to figure out how do independent contractors, self-employed individuals, and sole proprietors also apply. I have heard a couple people being told by their CPAs that they don't qualify. That's not true. I have heard people hearing from their bank that they're not able to handle their applications. And while that might be the case, that doesn't mean you still can't apply. So
Correct. There is
ultimately,
a portal to apply if you don't have a bank that is participating in the program.
and there is, and forgive me, I didn't try to go look that up,
No,
but it is, that is the struggle because most banks are trying to be responsive to their business clients first.
correct.
And there are a lot of people who are sole proprietors who essentially kind of live out of the same checking account, whether it's for their business or for themselves. So they don't have a separate business account, right? It may be a separate checking account for their business, but it's still a personal account. And the bank doesn't identify them separately. So again, it's all about patience. And there's talk of releasing another $250 billion towards the same program because they can see that there's already such high demand and such need that they're going to have to fund it even bigger than they already have. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, that gives everyone time right now to focus on getting their tax returns completed.
Mm-hmm.
They have the documentation in place. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So the real thing is sometimes it's just so hard to kind of know what to do and where to go. And while I certainly spent a lot of time making myself familiar with the CARES Act and talking to a number of clients and friends who've been impacted by this. My goal is just to be a resource. So if people have questions, well, I can't speak for each specific bank or I can't answer specifically to the EIDL program, maybe I have some anecdotal knowledge from what someone else has gone through that can help guide you along that path. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, they're more than welcome to. Ashley, when you send out this link, please feel free to include my email and my phone number to everybody.
Happy to. Thank you, Gretchen. And just as a final note, I'd like to just tell our agents that I have long been preaching that you should do as I say and not as I do. So finally, Gretchen will acknowledge that finally, about 5 months ago, I finally started my first IRA with Gretchen. She made it painless. It's been great. To be honest with you, I did a smallish amount of monthly contribution till I could get my arms wrapped around having that come out of my bank account every month. And it has been, honestly, I barely noticed it because it's been fabulous. And I got a quarterly report and was amazed at how much money I already had in there. So
Yeah.
as someone who preaches that you should really be planning for your retirement, and maybe I'm not as great at that as I should be, I would totally encourage anyone who's been thinking about that or putting that off to call you and start that baby step with you because you made it
Thank you.
so easy to do.
As I long say, the hardest part is getting started,
Yes,
right?
and now
So,
it's a habit, and now I can increase that if I want to. My goal is to increase it every year, the amount that I'm contributing. So that's a bite-sized goal I know I can do, and it's just the habit is now in place. So I appreciate it very much.
that's what I'm here for. I'm essentially a financial coach, just reminding you to do that one extra lap or one extra rep that you don't really want to do.
That's right, and it's easy once you're doing it. So I appreciate it, and thank you
My
for being
pleasure.
with us today and giving us all your knowledge you have on this so far.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Again, if anyone has any questions, have them reach out to me, and I'm happy to be a resource in any way I can.
Thank you, Gretchen.
My pleasure. Thank you.